evening and welcome to the North Metro Mayors Association Maple Grove Legislative Candidate Forum. My name is Mark Stephenson. I am the Mayor of Maple Grove and a board member of the North Metro Mayors Association. Thank you all for joining us tonight. The North Metro Mayor Association was created in 1987 as a nonpartisan organization advocating for issues and opportunities of importance to northern suburbs in the Twin Cities. I'd also like to thank the Twin West Chamber of Commerce for partnering with us on today's forum. Our goal in sponsoring tonight's legislative candidate forum for House Districts 34A and 34B is to provide citizens with an opportunity to learn about the candidates' ideas and positions on issues that we believe are important to the future of our communities. Tonight we'll have 2 rounds, one for each district. We'll pose 5 prepared questions. Responses will be in a rotating order with set time limits on their answers. I note that these limits are maximums and not minimums. We regret that we cannot cover all issues of interest tonight due to time constraints, as we will focus on city and state governance, transportation, and finance questions. We will solicit questions from the audience and use many of these questions as time permits. Please write your questions on a note cards available and give them to the North Metro Mayor's staff, who will forward them to me. Questions will be addressed to both candidates, so please refrain from asking responses for specific candidates. I'm pleased to introduce the candidates for tonight's our House District 34A. We have Kristen Robbins and Daniel Solon, and for House District 34B we have incumbent Representative Dennis Smith. His challenger Christian Bonner couldn't be here tonight. Thank you for being here. We'll begin with our forum for House District 34B with House Representative Dennis Smith. At this time, we'll hear the opening statement from Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and the North Metro Mayors Association for having this forum, and to all of you for coming out here in this little rainstorm that we're having, and to everyone watching on TV. Thank you for participating and trying to learn as much about the candidates in this process. We're all in this together, and I appreciate you being here. I'm Dennis Smith, and I've had the privilege of serving this community for the last 4 years in the House of Representatives, and it is truly an honor. When I go to St. Paul, I take the ideals of Maple Grove and Osseo, of the citizens, and try to represent us in the best way possible. I have a long and very, I'd say, reputation at the Capitol of working to try to find common sense solutions and to finding bills to get Democratic and Republican people to author these bills with me. And I have a list of bills very long that Governor Dayton signed as standalone bills. And I'm very proud of that, working with the governor in the Senate and other people in the House in order to get these variety of bills passed that really represent our area and the state and allow our state to move forward in a positive way. Thank you for being here. I look forward to our discussion.
The first question tonight are, what are the top 1 or 2 issues you hear about while campaigning, and if elected, what will you do to work in a collaborative way to address those issues?
The first issue that I wanted to talk about that I hear a lot at the doors and also has been an issue that we've all dealt with is healthcare. And the healthcare costs, there's so many good things that have come out of the ACA and some other reforms that have done, and there's some things that still need to be tweaked. Pre-existing conditions is something that was really needed and we all need to have, but the costs are just too high. I have a myriad of stories of business owners that are still paying $15,000 or $20,000, sometimes $25,000 in premiums. And we need to find a way to bring market solutions that will allow hospitals and healthcare providers to provide services in a cost-effective way that doesn't literally bankrupt some people while providing healthcare for everyone. That's the first issue. The second issue is transportation. We're in the middle of a discussion about what type of transportation we want to have here in Minnesota and in the metropolitan area. And a big discussion is about transit or traditional roads and bridges. And I'm a big fan of all transportation. In 2014, when I first ran, the Southwest Rail train was something that was discussed a lot. And I did the math, and I realized, I determined that between Maple Grove and Eden Prairie, we could have a 100-lane freeway built between Maple Grove and Eden Prairie if we use the money we're using for the Southwest Rail line. Now, that obviously is not a realistic answer, but it goes to show the cost of what trains are. And we need to have trains where they make sense, but also we need to make sure that we're not using money in an inappropriate way, and we need to use our resources the best way to continue building our roads and bridges, because that's where the majority of Minnesotans travel around in the Twin Cities as well.
The second question tonight is, both parties agree that increased funding is needed for road and transit system improvements. How would you propose those funds be raised?
I'm very proud to vote last session for the largest increase in transportation funding without a tax increase. Our state, we don't have a taxing, we don't have a revenue problem. We have more receipts than we know what to do with. We've had surpluses every session that I've been in St. Paul. So we don't need to tax more, in my opinion. I think we need to spend more on something that's in the Constitution. Our state Constitution talks about doing three things: funding education, keeping us safe, and transportation. And transportation changes throughout time, and trains and buses are a big part of that. We have one of the best busing systems in the entire state. Maple Grove does, right here. It's an incredible system. I was very proud to author a bill that allowed busing to go from suburb to suburb. And we tried it, and it was a great program, and it didn't work out very well. I hope that we can try it again. But the great thing about busing is that if it doesn't work, you can just stop it and try something else. Whereas when you build trains, they're very permanent, and you can't really change them around. So we really need to make sure that we're using the right type of transportation funds, and then also carving out existing revenues and dedicating them to transportation. There's a couple of bills talking about, if you buy a part for your car, about having the sales tax on that dedicated to transportation. That seems to make sense, and I think solutions like that, I think a lot of people think that we already do that, but we don't. So I think solutions like that are a way to dedicate funding to transportation without raising new taxes.
The next question tonight will be, what should be the role of the Metropolitan Council in guiding policy development in the North Metro?
So the Met Council, the origination of this was to make sure that cities, when they were building, could share water and sewer and really have a system where it kind of filled in the gaps. It has now grown to a over 4,000 person organization, all unelected, and they've gotten out of their scope. Those people aren't elected, and the local councils and the local mayors and the legislature, that is their role to determine most of what the Met Council does. And we really need to, I think we really need to dial back the scope of the Met Council and have them work on what they were originally intended for, and let the cities, the elected representatives, serve that purpose.
The next question is, Minnesota's business property taxes are among the highest in the nation. What would you do with the legislature to address this?
We certainly are one of the highest taxed nations, highest taxed areas, and not only in property tax, but in other categories as well. And that's frustrating, but Minnesota has demonstrated an ability and a willingness to pay a lot of taxes. We receive a lot of services for that, and for the most part, people are happy. I contend, and I think that we are growing government too fast in an unsustainable fashion, so I think we need to decrease taxes. But property taxes in particular creates an environment where businesses don't have a voice at the table, yet they bear a lot of the burden on those property taxes. And businesses, we need to continue to make Minnesota a great place for businesses to start and to grow and develop their offices and their products here. We have a history of being a great state where so many products known throughout the world are developed here. But property taxes is one of the burdens that companies face if the tax is too high, where they want to go elsewhere where the taxes aren't as high. So we need to lower property taxes.
The next question is, your community is part of not just a regional or national marketplace, but a global one that competes for business and talent on a global basis. What policies would you support to help retain and attract businesses and talent to the region?
I think we need to continue to watch the tax rate and also decrease regulation at the legislature to make Minnesota the best place for somebody who wants to start a business and wants to grow the business. There's a study done a couple of years ago about the number of businesses that leave Minnesota and go to South Dakota or other states. And with that goes thousands of jobs, charitable dollars, and a big ripple effect throughout the economy. I've carried a lot, I've drafted and passed a lot of legislation at the legislature dealing with making it more friendly for businesses to stay in Minnesota, but still being good corporate citizens, and we need to continue to do more of that.
That completes the prepared question portion of our debate tonight. We now will move to the audience questions, if there are any. So we'll proceed forward. The first question deals with pre-K for children. Will you find a way to fund pre-K for all children? If so, how will you do it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think making pre-K mandatory for all 4-year-olds is the right way to spend our education dollars, a limited amount of funds. With our graduation rate near 80%, I think that is purely unacceptable. I think before we start a 14th grade, which is what pre-K is, I think we should have much closer to 100% graduation rate for our seniors in high school. We have a great program currently in pre-K where it's economic-based and it's scholarship-based, and I proudly support that, and that's been, the funding for that has increased over the last couple of years. That is a great way to impact the children that need it, because there are some children that need it. And that program that we have at the state right now really serves that purpose. But making it mandatory is not necessary, and we need to focus our precious education dollars on the children in the other 13 grades.
Healthcare costs, especially drugs, are increasing for everyone. How can Minnesota assist seniors on Medicare with these costs?
The costs for all of healthcare have really spiraled out of control, and this is part of the big puzzle that we're trying to find. And I think bringing more market-based solutions and bringing competitiveness is really the right way to lower our healthcare costs. When consumers have choices and they know what those choices cost, it'll have an impact on the marketplace like it does for all the other services that we buy. I remember several years ago when I went into an HSA plan, I went to the doctor for my annual physical, and I asked, what are the different components of the physical, and what's the cost breakdown, and then what's the benefit of it? When you're going to go get new tires, you ask, well, what kind of tires should I buy? How much money do I want to spend? What's the benefit of it? We need to look at the same thing for our health care. And in those areas that we need to provide the opportunity for that to happen.
The next question is, what is your actual active policy-making experience?
I've had the pleasure of serving in the legislature for the last 4 sessions. I've had a myriad of bills passed. It's over 30 standalone bills passed and signed by Governor Dayton, as well as many other bills that are part of larger omnibus bills, as well as co-authored bills as well.
The last question that I have here right now is, what have you demonstrated to be your ability to fundraise within your district?
Fundraising is a part of campaigning. A lot of people don't really enjoy that, and it's a part that gets talked about maybe in some of the ads that are out right now with some of the other races. I fundraise in my district as well as throughout the state. It's a part of campaigning. It's a part that people probably don't talk about very much, but it's a necessary part, and I do that.
Okay. Are there other questions, or are we? Okay. So then we will turn to your closing statement, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thanks to the North Metro Mayors Association for holding this forum, and thank you for all of you for being here and everyone watching either streaming or later on the web. It's been my honor and privilege to represent this area in the legislature, and I respectfully ask for your vote starting tomorrow through November 6th to go back to St. Paul and continue to represent this area in a way that we really are proud of, where we really can accomplish bills that have signatures from both parties. I have monthly town hall meetings. I see some familiar faces in the crowd that have been to these. I have those monthly. I enjoy hearing from all of you, so please reach out to me, whether it's through my website, dennissmith.org, or email. My cell phone is published as well. Feel free to text or call or tweet or Instagram. And if you have any questions, I enjoyed the conversation. I hope to see you on your doorstep. And again, I respectfully ask for your vote November 6th or before. Thank you.
This brings us to the close of this candidate forum for the State House of Representatives. We would like to thank Dennis Smith, the audience, the cable TV staff, the Twin West Chamber, and the City of Maple Grove for hosting this forum. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, November 6th. We'll have a short break before continuing with House District 34A. Good evening and welcome to the North Metro Mayors Association Maple Grove Legislative Candidate Forum. My name is Mark Stephenson and I'm the Mayor of Maple Grove. I'm also a board member of the North Metro Mayors Association. Thank you all for joining us tonight. The North Metro Mayors Association was created in 1987 as a nonpartisan organization advocating for issues and opportunities of importance to northern suburbs in the Twin Cities. I would also like to thank the Twin West Chamber of Commerce for partnering with us on today's forum. Our goal in sponsoring tonight's legislative candidate forum for House District 34A and 34B is to provide citizens with an opportunity to learn about the candidates' ideas and positions on issues that we believe are important to the future of our communities. Tonight we will have 2 rounds, 1 for each district. We will pose 5 prepared questions. Responses will be in a rotating order with set time limits on their answers. I note these time limits are maximums and not minimums. We regret that we cannot cover all issues of interest tonight due to time constraints, as we will focus on city and state governance, transportation, and finance questions. We will solicit questions from the audience and use as many of these questions as time permits. Please write your questions on the note cards and provide them to North Metro staff, who will forward them to me. Questions will be addressed to both candidates, so please refrain from asking questions for response from specific candidates. I'm pleased to introduce our next candidates for us tonight. For House District 34, we have Daniel Solon and Kristen Robbins. We will now hear the opening statements from the candidates, and first we'll hear from Mr. Solon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to the North Metro Mayors Association for organizing tonight's forum, also the Twin West Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for the audience members for being here tonight and everyone watching at home. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan Solon, and I'm the DFL candidate for state representative in 34A. I am a resident of Rogers, Minnesota, where I live with my wife, Dora, and my 2 sons, Teddy and Marshall, as well as recently caring for my wife's 12-year-old nephew. I live a full life right now as a stay-at-home father of a 5-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. Now the added challenge of raising a middle schooler, I have plenty to keep me occupied, and yet I still thought it was a good idea to run for office. It turns out I have a habit of doing the difficult thing because it is the right thing to do. I joined the Navy out of high school. I was selected to the Navy's most selective program, the nuclear power field. I like to tell people that my time in the nuclear power field was like drinking from a fire hose. Being entrusted to operate nuclear reactors at such a young age was a huge responsibility, but the men and women I served with were exceptional, and together we played a part in bringing freedom and democracy around the world. I have had the honor to become a leader of those men and women, and for that experience I'm forever grateful. My fellow service members and I served a higher purpose, one that transcends politics. We serve for the good of all Americans, and we never let anything get in the way of that pursuit. That is why I want to be your next representative. My service to you will be above politics. In a time where bipartisanship is a talking point, we must look to those who have a track record of faithful service to their communities. Not only did I serve on active duty for 9 years, I continue to serve in the Navy Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Ms. Robbins. Ms. Robbins.
Thank you. Thank you to the North Metro Mayors Association and the Twin West Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this evening's event. I really look forward to it. I also want to thank you, Dan, for your service in the military. We may disagree on policy, but we all respect and really honor your service and sacrifice and your family. So my name is Kristen Robbins, and I am running to be the next state representative for 34A, which represents Maple Grove, Rogers, and Dayton. Our current representative, Joyce Pepin, stepped down this summer, and she has endorsed me to replace her. I'm a wife of 25 years to my wonderful husband Brent, and we have 3 beautiful daughters who we have raised here in the northwest suburbs. I've lived in Maple Grove for more than 8 years now. I'm an active community volunteer. I have taught junior achievement. I have been a destination imagination coach, taught Sunday school and Awana at my church. I currently serve on the board of my church's food shelf, Hope Bridge, and my family and I actively volunteer there. I'm also a soccer mom, basketball mom, trap shooting mom, so I've done all the things that busy families do volunteering at schools. I'm originally from Crookston, and I attended Bethel University, where I got a degree in political science and economics. After that, I went to Washington, where I worked for 3 years as the legislative director for a member of Congress. And during that time, I ran a bipartisan coalition of members of Congress as a staffer, and it was called Pork Busters, and we fought wasteful government spending on a bipartisan basis. After that, I got a master's degree in economics at Washington University in St. Louis, and then I came back and I worked at the state legislature on education issues, passing a bill that helped give families tax credits and deductions for education expenses. I was stay-at-home mom for 10 years, and I currently serve as the executive director of the Economic Club of Minnesota, where we focus on global competitiveness for Minnesota economy and companies, and I've been doing that we're starting our 11th season. So I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our first question. This is the first prepared question. This is a 2-minute time for answer, and after each candidate has answered, there will be an opportunity for a rebuttal. What is the top 1 or 2 issues you hear about while campaigning, and if elected, what will you do in a collaborative way to address these issues? Ms. Robbins.
So I'm out there doing economics every day, and the number 1 things I hear, it's kind of a trade-off, are transportation and gridlock and healthcare costs. And so on transportation, I mean, in the short run, we really need to finish 610. We need to do some other projects. We need to finish the intersection or redo the intersection at 169 and Elm Creek Parkway. I know they also really want to redo the intersection at 101 and Bass Lake Road. We are growing, which is a great problem to have in our communities, but we have to make sure that our transportation, roads and bridges are able to handle all the new families that are moving up here. So I would really prioritize that. Secondly, on healthcare, I'm an economist by training, and I really believe that markets and incentives work, and our current healthcare system needs more of both. So I really think we need price transparency. The legislature made a stab at that last year by having hospitals have more price transparency, but there's much more we should be doing on provider transparency and insurance cost transparency. We also need to do more on the individual market. Again, the legislature made a stab at stabilizing the individual market very successfully by instituting a reinsurance program, but there's much more we can do on that. And then finally, there's a federal issue where they've allowed now at the federal government level a short-term 1-year insurance policy available to families that wasn't available under the ACA. And Minnesota law does not allow us to do that, and so fixing that in Minnesota statute so families can take advantage of that would also really help.
Mr. Sullivan.
The top 2 issues that I'm hearing from voters are education and healthcare. Within education, there are a number of topics that are important to people. Universal pre-K is a priority for many voters, and it is for me personally. People recognize that you cannot underestimate the positive impact that nurturing young minds has for the future of state of Minnesota. And long-term, that's going to mean that we're going to have more educated and productive adults going into our workforce who are going to be better problem solvers for the next generation of issues. Also, parents who choose to stay at home with their kids will be able to go back into the workforce a year earlier than before, and that is going to have an immediate positive impact on our economy, especially in this tight labor market. In post-World War II, we invested in educating an entire generation of GIs, and we had decades of prosperity afterward. I'm going to work to ensure that the state invests in our next greatest generation. Healthcare being the other major issue I'm hearing from voters, there's a lot of frustration and feelings of helplessness surrounding the issue. I ask people if they think they're getting a good value for what they're spending on healthcare, and almost always the answer is, I don't know, or I don't think so. So there's a major disconnect in our healthcare system, and that's because it's unlike any other market that we enter into. In other markets, you get to decide whether or not you're going to buy a product. but you don't have a say in getting sick or injured. And that's the fact and the reason why we pay so much more for our health care in the United States. There's also mountains of bureaucracy that intentionally obscure the true cost of what you're paying for. So, as a state, what I think we can do is make Minnesota Care more than just a public option. It'll add competition into the market, and it'll also be the example of what a health insurer should be in the state. I'll fight to give you the same rights in healthcare as you do in every other market.
And now you have an opportunity for a rebuttal, Ms. Robbins.
Thank you. I agree that education is also really important, and it's something I've focused on in my life in many stages. I don't support universal pre-K. I think that the current system where we provide scholarships for low-income families who want that option is the way to go. We have limited funding for education, and studies have shown that in the achievement gap, that the families who really need that extra boost in the pre-K years tend to be driven by socioeconomic issues. So I would really support expanding the pre-K option for low-income families or free and reduced lunch families, but I don't think we need to spend money to make it mandatory for everyone who's got a 4-year-old.
The next question is, both parties agree that increased funding is needed for road and transit system improvements. How would you propose those funds be raised? Mr. Solon.
So I think we need to start the discussion by agreeing on a basic fact, and that's our roads and infrastructure are in severe disrepair, and it has to be addressed now. The can has been kicked down the road for far too long, and now that road is full of potholes. The condition of our roads and bridges is a safety issue. It unnecessarily puts our commuters at risk. And also, poor roads cost Minnesotans $1.2 billion a year in extra vehicle repairs. Minnesota businesses spend an extra $232 million a year on additional freight transportation costs caused by traffic congestion. Our current funding structure can only afford to put a Band-Aid on the problem. It's not enough to cover the total investment that we need. So I think we need to find a short-term solution and begin to work towards a long-term source of funds. The solution is going to have to be a bipartisan one, and I honestly don't know what that's going to look like. Some favor a gas tax, others favor an auto part sales tax or tax on rental vehicles and leases. But our legislators should be working across the aisle, put every idea on the table, gather the information, and decide on the best way to fund. I personally do have reservations about a gas tax. If we're going to have one, I think it needs to have a sunset date. That's for a number of reasons. I think it'll force lawmakers to find a suitable long-term solution. It's also because it's not viable in and of itself. In 10 years, changes in technology and transportation methods will lower gas tax revenue to a fraction of what it is today. I also think it disproportionately affects middle and lower income families, especially the people in our district who drive long distances into the city. For those families, their fuel expenses are not inconsequential. So I think we are going to sort this out at the legislature this year, and it'll be a bipartisan effort.
Thank you. Ms. Robbins.
So I do not support increasing the gas tax. I agree that changes in transportation technology will make it less effective as a stable funding source over the next many years. We're seeing new types of vehicles, electric vehicles, automated driverless cars. Some people say hovercraft. Now we have those electric scooters running around downtown. So there's so many modes of transportation and increases in fuel efficiency that make the gas tax not a stable source. So I do support the legislation that was talked about earlier, where we have a current tax on auto repairs, on auto sales, on leases, and that tax right now just goes in the general fund, and instead we could take that money and dedicate it to roads and bridges, and I would support that at the legislature this session. I think that would provide a long-term source of funding for roads and bridges, no matter what kind of vehicle it is, whether it's electric or automated or whatever, you'd still have to pay tax to buy it. So I think that's a much more stable source of funding, and I think that there will be bipartisan support for that at the legislature this year.
Mr. Sloan, you have a chance for a rebuttal?
I don't have a rebuttal for that.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next question. What should be the role of the Metropolitan Council in guiding policy development in the North Metro? Ms. Robbins.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. The Met Council is really a crazy form of government for our region. We are the only state in the nation that has regional government by unelected people. Generally, around the country, regional government is done by what's called a COG, Council of Governments, which is made up of elected people like mayors and county commissioners, and people who are responsible to the taxpayers and who are responsible to the people when they're regulating them or putting out regulations about density or sewers or where traffic patterns can go. The Met Council has $1 billion budget. They have the power to levy $80 million a year on all of us, and they're not elected. And they change every 4 years with a new governor. They're appointed by the governor, all 17 members of the Met Council. It's governor appointed. And so every 4 years, they're changing. And so it's hard to have a long-term vision, a 20, 40-year vision for a regional government when they're not elected, when they're changing all the time, and when they respond to the governor's agenda, not to the people who are being taxed and regulated by them. So I think it's time to change the governance structure of the Met Council to a council of governments.
Mr. Solon.
I think the most important role that the Met Council is going to play is that of a partner. I'd like to see them engage with our communities more, be present and active in our future plans, rather than just directing us on what they think we should be doing. The Met Council's Thrive 2040 initiative, I think we should take that, work with the cities of Dayton, Rogers, and Maple Grove so that each community can develop in the way they need to. We are the communities that are doing all the growing in traffic, in housing, in business. The Met Council estimates that by 2040, District 34 will grow in population by 45,000 people. Having a meaningful partnership with the Met Council means we might be able to better avoid some of the pains that come with that growth, especially in Rogers and Dayton, which are expected to double by 2040. Working more closely with our local governments isn't the only place that I think the Met Council can improve. Rogers and Maple Grove are two of the top 20 contributors to the Met Council's Fiscal Disparities Program. The formulas that they use to take and redistribute tax revenues don't adequately capture the needs of our growing communities. Our communities would like to be proactive in addressing needs such as transportation, rather than waiting for them to become a big enough problem that the Met Council notices them. So I'll make sure to partner with those who have expertise in local government funding to ensure that we are not at the mercy of some formula, and I'll make sure that we get more transportation resources from the council before our commutes become even worse than they are.
Ms. Robbins, you have a chance for rebuttal.
Thank you. Just back to my point, I think having 17 unelected people running the Met Council and having this 2040 vision, which is really tied to a lot of social standards that really our elected officials have had no say in, I think the better option is to change the structure and have it be our mayors and our county commissioners and our local elected officials who are making these decisions.
The next question is, Minnesota's business property taxes are among the highest in the nation. What would you do at the legislature to address this? Mr. Solon.
Well, I think a lot of politicians talk about tax cuts, and they often follow through. But when it comes to spending, nothing ever changes. It's a reality that's taken place in far too many states across the country, and every single time it's regular people like you and I that end up paying for those business tax cuts. I won't let that happen here in Minnesota. Our people are our greatest asset, and we need to put working families first, rather than those who can buy influence. Focusing on business property taxes alone is how you start a race to the bottom. Businesses aren't sprinting towards the exits. In reality, they're knocking on the doors to get in. Successful businesses look at a variety of factors when choosing where to expand and invest. Our cost of living, our education system, and our diverse workforce are just a few of the reasons that businesses come to Minnesota, stay in Minnesota, and grow in Minnesota. We have 19 Fortune 500 companies in the Twin Cities. Boston Scientific continues to invest in our district and even recently purchased another Maple Grove-based business to the tune of $406 million. In Thief River Falls, Minnesota, we have DigiKey, which posts $20 billion in sales annually and is breaking ground on a $300 million expansion to their facility. As a legislator, I'll ensure we maintain the quality of life that we have here in Minnesota which makes our state such a great place to invest.
Ms. Robbins.
So we do have way too high of business property taxes here, and we also have a very unique system here that, again, no other state has. So everybody pays local property taxes, including businesses, but we are the only state in the country that also has a state business property tax. And so that really adversely affects people's incentive to create jobs here. And I really think that when businesses are looking at the cost of coming here versus other places, they look at local property tax and then they say, oh, one state in the whole nation has this extra state property tax. It is to the tune of $862 million a year, and it's 25 to 30% of average businesses' bill for property tax, and that's not on top of all the other taxes they pay. So I really think we need to begin to address this. The legislature in 2017 did make a step in the right direction. They exempted the first $100,000 of market value so that small businesses have a little break on this, which I think is really helpful because we need to continue to grow small businesses. But I think we have to look at a better source of funding for the state general fund than this additional, unique in the whole country, extra state property tax levy. It's just uncompetitive and it won't be sustainable in the long run.
And response.
I think I would like to respond to that. I don't think we have an issue creating jobs in Minnesota. Right now, we have an issue filling jobs in Minnesota. If what we are doing is unique in the nation, I think we're doing something right, because clearly Minnesota's economy, our labor participation rate and our unemployment is one of the best in the nation. So clearly we're doing something right in the state of Minnesota.
Your community is part of not just a regional or national marketplace, but a global one that competes for business and talent on a global basis. What policies would you support to help retain and attract businesses and talent to the region? Ms. Robbins.
So I do want to just get back to taxes for a minute. So we have the third highest individual and business, small business pass-through tax rate in the country. We also have the third highest corporate tax rate in the country. And you add on this business state property tax levy. That is just the beginning. We also are one of 13 states to tax Social Security income. We still tax military benefits, and we still have a really out of whack estate tax. All of these things are disincentives for people to move to Minnesota or to stay in Minnesota. And we do have a lot of great jobs here, but I have worked in the Economic Club of Minnesota with CEOs and presidents of businesses from very small to very large for the last 10 years. And many people have told me they will not expand in Minnesota until we get this tax thing figured out, or they will just keep what they have here and move other plants or open other factories other places. So it really is hurting our competitiveness and our ability to grow jobs. We all really want to do what's best for all of our families, and we need jobs for ourselves and for our future students coming through the system. The other thing we really need, we have a skilled worker shortage, and we really need to retrain and attract and keep workers. So there's a lot of things we can do on that, but one of the ideas I have is we have fantastic education here, and we educate people from all over the world and all over the country, and then they leave. So maybe we could come up with some sort of incentive of forgiving student loans if they work and pay taxes in our state for 5 years. We have to match, we have full employment here right now, but there are still pockets of people who don't have jobs. We need to figure out, like DigiKey has done, how to partner with technical colleges and help them train people who need a job to the existing jobs. And that mismatch of skills can really make a difference and make sure that we keep and attract workers here.
Mr. Solon.
Well, I guess I should first say that the state doesn't tax military benefits. I've lived all over the country. I've never paid Minnesota state taxes on my income while out of state. So the question is a great question. We are absolutely in an interconnected global economy, and we need to set ourselves apart against some steep competition. I think the answer is in what many business leaders are already beginning to do, and that's investing in their workforce and in the communities that they reside in. It's a trend that I love to see personally. These businesses are not seeing labor costs as a number to be minimized in order to maximize profitability. They're beginning to recognize that the quality of their workforce is their competitive advantage. These companies recognize that providing health care and paid sick leave makes their employees as well as their families healthier, and overall their productivity is higher. Companies who provide paid family leave for illness of a loved one or childbirth avoid putting workers in a situation where they may be forced to leave their job. They get to retain that talent and avoid the loss of efficiency and the cost related to a new hire. Companies who are paying more than $15 as their minimum wage are cornering all of the best talent in the labor market. And companies that pay for their employees to advance their education are producing managers who find new ways to improve because they have the institutional knowledge to do so. Businesses recognize all these facts, and they want to provide these benefits to their employees. But I acknowledge that for many small businesses, it may seem too costly. And that is why, as a lawmaker, I will make structuring our tax code in a manner that enables Minnesota businesses to invest in their workforce and their communities one of my top priorities. Like I mentioned earlier, our people are our greatest resource, and if you are willing to invest in them, we will invest in you.
And now you have an opportunity for rebuttal, Ms. Robbins.
I think markets work and incentives work, and when there's a tight labor market, many more companies are adding those additional benefits, but I don't think it's something the state should be mandating. People will respond to the market signals, and they will provide more leave, more health benefits, more education benefits, and I think we're seeing that play out, and I just think we have to continue to allow the markets to drive the incentives.
Well, and to clarify, I didn't say I'd like the state to mandate it. I said I'd like to structure the tax code to incentivize it.
It's allowed under the rules. Now, as audience questions, you go first, Mr. Solon. Do you support charter schools and homeschooling?
I think everyone has the right to homeschool their children, absolutely. I don't think there's anything that I would do to get in the way of that. As far as charter schools are concerned, I have an issue when we take something like education and we turn it into a place to make profits. I think we do a great job in our public schools, and if there's room for improvement, I think we need to work on that as a community together to improve that.
Ms. Robbins, same question. Do you support charter schools and homeschooling?
Absolutely. Charter schools are public schools, and they are treated the same, and they don't make money. They are regular public school. It's just that the governance structure is different. So parents and teachers serve on the board and have more opportunity to have management oversight of how the school is run. I think it's been successful, and again, it's very market-driven. I think homeschooling is a fantastic option for families who want to do it. So I'm for all of the above. We need great choices for public school, homeschool, charter school, and the more we can give parents options, the more opportunity they will have to make the right choice for their individual kid at different ages and stages. It could be different in each family.
Next question is first for Ms. Robbins. Do you support single-payer care?
No, I do not. I think the more competition we have in the healthcare marketplace, whether it's in insurance or in providers, the better, and I really think that single payer would become a bureaucratic nightmare. The current proposal to turn Minnesota Care into MNsure for All or something would cost $17 billion a year. We cannot afford that. Our total budget is $38 billion for a biennium. If we go with this $17 billion a year for a single payer program, it would bankrupt us very quickly.
Mr. Solon.
I think we started something with the Affordable Care Act years ago, and that was the beginning of a solution. It wasn't the entire solution, though. And there's room for improvement in the structure that we already have. I think Minnesota did a good job by creating its own exchanges, and I think making Minnesota Care a public option is going to really introduce that competition and set the example of how a health insurer should operate.
The next question is for you, Mr. Solon, to start with. Will you find a way to fund pre-K for all children? If so, how will you do it?
Absolutely. I think voluntary pre-K it's going to pay for itself. Absolutely. So it's something that we have to invest in, but how many people here at home do not invest in anything ever? Do you just squirrel money away? Education is an investment that's going to pay the highest rate of returns. I think we do that by using the current funding structure, and that's all.
Ms. Robbins? Will you find a way to fund pre-K for all children? If so, how will you do it?
No, I think we should have it as it's currently structured, where it's an opportunity for families who are low income to have scholarships. Other families of higher income, I don't believe they need a state benefit like that. They can currently fund their own children's pre-K if they want to do so, and we could continue to let them do that and have that opportunity, but the state money should go to families in need in the lower income side.
Next question is, healthcare costs, especially drugs, are increasing for everyone. How can Minnesota assist seniors on Medicare with these costs? Ms. Robbins?
You know, I don't know a lot about the healthcare drug market, but I know that incentives and markets work. So I would want to steer towards programs that would allow for more competition in the drug market. I think there's some proposals out there where pharmacists currently are under some sort of a gag rule that I don't fully understand, where they can't even suggest alternative drugs and generics to the patients when they come to pick up their prescription. So I'd want to take a look at that. So I think there are many things we can do to inject some competition and incentives for saving money, but a lot of it is done with price transparency, which we really don't have in the drug market right now. Patients should be able to look at a menu of seeing what different drugs cost and how they compare, and be able to have some voice in which one they are assigned by the doctor.
Mr. Sloan?
Well, I think absolutely we need to be taking care of our seniors and elderly, especially in their time of need. So when it comes to prescription drug costs for them, I think we need to be going after the prescription drug companies that we've seen it time and time again. Already profitable drugs skyrocket in price 200, 300 times, 700 times in some instances. So I think there's a role for us to play in going after those companies and making sure that they don't take advantage of people.
Next one is for you, Mr. Solon, to start with. Would you prioritize lanes over light rail or light rail over more lanes if you had to choose one, and why?
So that's a difficult question, because going into this process, I know that there's so much to be learned, and we have a citizen legislature, and regular people are going to go serve at our state capitol. So I have a lot to learn on this issue. Coming from my district's perspective, I think absolutely we have a need for more lanes. There's multiple bottlenecks on my way home, so I think there's definitely more work to figure out the answer to that, but that's my answer right now.
Ms. Robbins?
Lanes over light rail.
Next question is, what are your plans to improve education opportunities for young people after high school, and how would you address the skills gap that currently exists? Ms. Robbins?
I think there are a lot of great opportunities that we can look into. I believe that, first of all, we have to address the achievement gap, and secondly, we have to make sure that students receive counseling in the high schools for the variety of options that are out there. A four-year degree is not the right path for everyone, and there are certainly many skilled programs where they could go, like Dunwoody, and find skilled jobs, apprenticeship programs. There's also a lot of other opportunities for doing Teach for America or service learning opportunities where they can gain some experience. I really think that we have to work with businesses and with our community colleges to help define programs that meet needs. So people have hope of getting a job right away, and they don't have to pile up debt, not being sure what they want to do. So I really think internships in the high school is another good option. A lot of students, if they had just a little bit of opportunity to go into a workplace and be exposed to different careers and different opportunities, that might help them set on a path of what they think is possible. So I think there's many things we can do. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Sol?
Coming from a background where I didn't go directly into college myself and I became successful, I think absolutely we need to remove the stigma that there is surrounding hard work, and more young people need to understand that there are great careers out there that don't require going into mountains of debt for. I think we all need to do better as a society of letting them know that those opportunities exist. So absolutely, the trades jobs, skilled jobs, we need to work together, public-private partnerships, to ensure that, that the employers in the state of Minnesota have the talent that they need. Because right now, we have a lot of people with college degrees, but absolutely none of the skills that our employers are looking for. So I put a high priority on alternatives to college, and I think we need to start going in that direction.
Next question is, what is, for Mr. Solon to start with, what is your actual active policy-making experience?
So, forgive me, but I've been serving in the military for the last 10 years, and you cannot actively participate in politics, but now that I'm in the Navy Reserves, I have this opportunity. So I don't have active policy experience, but really I think right now, in this day and age, with this political climate, that's a benefit. I don't have any favors that I owe to anyone. I'm doing this for the people in my community. They are the people that are speaking to me, and they are the people that I'm going to represent. So my experience is in the right areas, I think.
Ms. Robbins?
As I mentioned, I used to work in Congress, and so I understand the legislative process. I've also worked on bipartisan coalitions, both in Congress on the Pork Busters Coalition and also at the state legislature to pass the Education and Tax Credits Bill. So I do understand how the policy-making process works. I clearly have a lot left to learn. I still, have so many issues and so many things that I would have to really dig in and learn, but I'm kind of a policy geek. I love this stuff, so I would really dig in and want to learn as much as possible.
Do we have other questions or not? Do we have time for more questions? No. Okay. We will now turn to the final statements, or closing statements. Mr. Solon?
Thank you all for being here today. This has been a great discussion. Thank you, Kristen. Many important issues. I hope that if you have more questions, you'll reach out to me on my website, solonforhouse.com, or on my official Facebook page. I'd like to close this evening by saying that I'm proud to have served you all in the military for the last decade, and I'd be honored to continue my service at the state capitol. When I'm there, I will continue to do what is difficult. I recognize that no one party has a monopoly on all good ideas, and knowing that, I will be the leader who walks across the aisle and gains bipartisan support for Minnesota's most important issues. If a leader that puts people before politics is important to you, then vote for Dan Solon this November. Thank you.
Ms. Robbins?
Thank you to all of you in the audience, and Dan and Mayor Stephenson, and for the Northwest Metro Mayors Association and the Twin West Chamber of Commerce for tonight's forum. I am a wife, a mom, a community member, and I would love to have the opportunity to continue to expand my service by representing Rogers, Dayton, and Maple Grove in the legislature. I believe my policy background and experience would make me an effective voice for our communities at the legislature, and that I would bring our concerns to the state capitol to compete with all the other concerns from around the state. My leadership style is to build coalitions that work together to solve problems and come up with creative solutions. I would want to work with the mayors, the city council members, the county commissioners, the school boards, and other people in our communities who already know so much depth on these policies to bring together solutions for all of us. I hope that you will consider me November 6th. Early voting starts tomorrow, so you can always vote in person, and I hope that you will check out my website. Thank you.
That brings us to the close of the North Metro Mayors Association Candidate Forum for State House of Representatives. We would like to thank the candidates, the audience, the cable TV staff, and the Twin West Chamber in the City of Maple Grove for hosting this forum. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, November 6th.